Anti-ICE protests breaking out across the country after the deadly shooting involving a federal agent in Minneapolis.
All right, joining us now, legal analyst Wendy Patrick, with so much to talk about. Let's start just where the legal protections are for protesters to begin with.
Well, protesters are protected by the First Amendment. We've been talking about that pretty heavily for the last 5 years since the pandemic. But we also have been talking about the fact that everybody has this right to self-defense, and where the two clash has just been again and again over the last 5 years, the flashpoints that we've been discussing, you know, who is liable, what are the rules, and one of the things we just saw in Minneapolis is tempers flaring in sub-zero temperatures. And what the chief just talked about, which I thought was great, is wouldn't it be something if we could find a way to avoid the tempers getting to that level to begin with, so it doesn't become violence, and they are able to enjoy their First Amendment protections without things getting ugly.
What does it take for these protests to become illegal? Where do you cross that line where you're protesting and then next thing you know, it's an illegal act where the federal agents are saying, well, that's illegal, I need to take action?
The federal agents are arguing that where protesters begin to impede them from their lawful duties is where the line is crossed. Now, the question becomes, what then? And when you have a chaotic scene and unfortunately violence erupts on the side of the protesters, who we've been seeing are throwing things and driving vehicles and everything else, when do law enforcement officers, when are they legally able to resort to force? And if so, what level of force? That's the question, the most important question over the last several years that has really divided the nation, unfortunately.
And those are the questions that are now coming up in this particular incident that happened in Minneapolis. So as this investigation is now underway, what are we seeing? What are we learning more?
We're learning more the more footage that comes out. That's one of the things we look at as investigators every time one of these incidents happens, is how many cameras caught the incident, from what vantage point, what can we believe, what can we rely on, and most importantly, the analysis is going to be from the perspective of the officer who resorted to deadly force. Why deadly force? Why not something less? That investigation currently in Minneapolis is being handled federally. That too is a question, because the state investigators are saying when that first happened, we were also involved. We were working cooperatively. We were a team. Then the feds took it over. We are available to help if needed. And that is another flashpoint, as people are saying, who should be the agency that investigates this? And do we have more than one? And what if their findings are in conflict?
From a legal point of view, there is an investigation going on. What does it do to an investigation, a legal investigation, when you have people in the highest levels of the federal government already making verdicts, if you will, on what happened within hours of the incident without having the full process of this investigation happen? How does that taint, if you will, the investigation itself?
Yeah, that's the great question. Is an investigation is meant to arrive at a verdict. Obviously, we wait for juries for that. But one of the things press conferences always want to make sure they've done is that they have the accurate facts necessary before making a statement. Because you're absolutely right. If a case goes to trial, jurors want to be able to rely on the integrity of the evidence in the courtroom, not be tainted by an investigation, a rush to judgment, or anything that was verbalized, unfortunately, beforehand. So what we've seen recently are a lot of public officials defending maybe camera footage that came out at the very beginning of the investigation, instead of waiting and seeing what happens. Because
should they know better? Well, at those levels of government, should they know better?
They should all know better. And ironically, Raul, that's what they said. They said, we waited until we had what we needed before we made a statement. But you have people saying that on both sides that are both being exposed to new evidence. But that's probably one of the most frustrating things about an investigation like this, where life is lost. Nobody wants to see a loss of life. We have a community grieving, but there's also a level of anger that's a result of people are looking and rushing to judgment before an investigation has been completed. Patience is a virtue, but it's also very difficult when you have a community that has been subjected already to the loss of life.
When we first started this conversation, I asked you about the protections that people who are protesting, what their protections are. On the flip end, for law enforcement, where are their protections? What are they?
Well, they have the same protection when it comes to acting in self-defense or attempting to protect the community. And that's one of the reasons where you have deadly force used. The investigation is going to look at what facts and circumstances were available to the officer before he did what he did. That's from the perspective of a reasonable officer. That's not from the perspective of a bystander who's catching the incident from some angle on a camera. But that analysis is difficult to talk to an angry community necessarily. When people are grieving, when they're angry, when they're emotional, they probably don't want to get into the nuts and bolts of a law and what's going to happen from this point. But officers are also entitled to safety. When you put on a uniform and you put on the badge, you don't say, I'm going to go home in a casket. You do have the right of self-defense. But the question is whether or not a particular act of force is justified. That's, as you were saying, why we need to wait to see what the investigation unfolds. It's a terrible situation, and the investigation is continuing.
You mentioned patience is a virtue. Patience is also in short supply.
Yeah, amen to that. Amen.
Wendy, we thank you again.
Thank you.